Our guest today is the co-founder of Maveron. Maveron is one of the top venture capital firms in the US, focused on companies creating consumer products. Now, you may not have heard of Maveron, but I bet you've heard of the companies they funded. Zulily, Groupon, General Assembly, eBay, Trupanion, Cranium, Drugstore.com, or maybe even Shutterfly. Maveron is responsible for helping all of these companies get started. And we are lucky to have Dan Levitan, the co-founder, today. Dan, welcome, and thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
And by the way, you look pretty good today.
Thanks.
So let's kind of jump right into it. Tell us what it is to be a venture capitalist.
It's an incredibly diverse and fun job. And what we try to do is help entrepreneurs fulfill their dreams. And basically, we have the incredible privilege of investing both our time and money to help them accelerate their progress.
And for your job, I mean, what you personally do on a daily basis, what is it that you like to do? What does Dan like to do?
I love the people side of our business because most of the value creation comes around making early bets on great entrepreneurs and helping them accelerate their progress, build their teams. And I love the ride with great entrepreneurs from obscurity to ubiquity.
Yeah. So you said something there early on about making bets because it's not easy to do what you do, and it's not easy to make good bets. So tell us, what do you think, what makes Maveron a little better about placing those bets?
Well, first, we only bet on entrepreneurs who are focused on building enduring, sustainable consumer brands. And how do we make our bets, or why are we better? We just try to get to know them over time and really learn before we have to put down a ton of money. And what we call it is we try to invest in lines, not dots. But our entire team focuses on getting to know the entrepreneur and trying to understand his or her ambitions and challenges.
Sure. So obviously you focus on the human element of the business. So in saying that, what is special about the human for an entrepreneur? What makes that person unique?
Well, doing a startup and doing it to venture scale is a really hard thing to do. Last year there were 1,600 companies that were funded by venture capitalists alone, and probably another 50,000 that were funded by angels.
Yeah.
And yet, only 5 to 10 in the consumer world every year become huge, significant companies.
Yeah.
And we're trying to find those significant companies way before it's obvious. It's a fun job, but it ain't easy.
Yeah, it ain't easy. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about that. So let's talk about the difference between an angel investor and a venture capitalist, because many people don't know the difference. So tell us the difference between an angel investor and you, venture capitalist.
So an angel investor typically invests his or her own money, and they're typically writing a $25,000 to $250,000 check. And they're typically in what's called a friends and family, or they're in the first rounds of financing for a company.
Yeah.
A venture capitalist is investing, largely speaking, bigger checks. And so we have two types of investments that we make. We have seed investments, where we typically write a $100,000 check early in a company, could be with angels. Mm-hmm. But then when we do the Series A, that's when a typical venture capitalist comes in, and we're talking much bigger check size in the millions.
Yeah. And so, you're consumer focused. Maveron's a consumer focused, VC. Tell us some of the investments you've made in the past that, maybe were not as consumer focused as you thought, or you would have liked them to have been different. Or did 10 years ago, did you make choices that were not consumer focused, completely 100% consumer focused?
Well, I think our biggest evolution over the last 10 years is just what's the definition of a consumer business. Yeah. So our first investment was a company that in 1998, when we made the investment, no one had ever heard of, called eBay. Yeah. And on the one hand, I think a lot of people thought of that as a technology company at the beginning. But really, on the other hand, what eBay was doing was it was taking flea markets and garage sales and opening up to the world. And it was less about slick technology and far more about matching a buyer and a seller in a completely unique and special way. And that business changed the lives of the sellers, and it enriched the lives of the buyers.
Yeah.
And so what we've focused on more and more over these last few years as cell phones, pads, and technology has gotten more ubiquitous is how do great entrepreneurs take technology to solve human problems?
Yeah. And let's talk a bit about that. What do you think is something very interesting right now that you guys are looking at, or maybe even looking at in the future, that are solving some technology problems that maybe we're not even aware of today?
Well, there's a lot of examples in our portfolio, thankfully. One is an invisible hearing aid. The technology is so small. It's called Eargo. It's a Silicon Valley-based company, and the hearing aid goes in your ear canal, and there's like a volleyball shuttlecock, not a badminton shuttlecock, that holds it in your ear, and you can control it. Next generation, you control it with your cell phone. And so hearing is a big problem in America. Many people are losing hearing, and there's such a stigma for having a hearing aid. So you'll be able to kind of have an enhanced hearing experience and not have people see it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. What are some of the things that you have found over the last, say, 4 or 5 years when the smartphones, started coming into our lives? What have you found in that industry that has really been something, a big surprise for Maveron or a big surprise for Dan Levitan?
I guess I'd say it surprised me how quickly we've come to trust using the cell phone to order products and services. I mean, around Seattle, how often do people now use Uber when 4 or 5 years ago it was unfathomable? And so we've got entrepreneurs coming to meetings all the time now, and they just Uber. So I think the trust that we have in brands on our cell phones, the way we give them our credit cards. I remember in 2000, we looked at a business called Blue Nile here in Seattle.
Oh, sure. The old,
And I naively believed that people wouldn't buy diamonds over the internet. And
you were wrong, my friend.
one of the many times. But think of how long ago that is. And now Blue Nile, which is a terrific Seattle company, sells $1 million diamonds over the web. So I think if I had to pick one thing, I would say the biggest thing that surprised me is trust. And probably the second would be just the power of technology increasingly improving in terms of bandwidth and everything else to deliver an incredible experience over the cell phone that would be unfathomable before.
Yeah. Hey, let's shift gears a bit and talk about things that when people have ideas, they need, they're always looking for funding. Obviously, they knock on your door at some level. What do you look for in startups? Like, what do you look for in a company to actually write a check for? What are the couple things that matter to Maveron?
Sure. I think it's important for our audience to recognize that not everything should be funded by VCs.
Sure.
And so the key is, what's your idea, and does that match the expectation of the funders that you're seeking? But in terms of Maveron, we really look for 3 things: a great CEO and a team that is extraordinary. Second, a huge prize, companies that are going after really big markets and that can be hundreds, if not billions of dollars. And then third, and importantly, a differentiated approach to their product. What do they do that's different and can create a more enduring experience for consumers? How does that product, for lack of a better image, integrate into the lives of its customers? And what we've found is the best consumer brands do that. And they do it in all sorts of different ways, but we're looking for not the 5th pet food retailer.
Sure.
We're looking for something that does it in a really powerful, impactful way.
And what ways can a founder, say a newly minted founder of a company, what ways can they, identify, people like you, or just finding money in general? What are some methods to the madness there?
Well, I think it's mind-blowing today what technology has done in terms of breaking down boundaries. We get, 3,000 or 4,000 inbound inquiries a year from all over.
Wow.
Frequently Asia, Russia, and certainly all over the United States. In terms of Seattle, I think GeekWire and TechCrunch are probably the biggest web resources, but there are just a ton of directories, and for basic consumer products, we funded a company I'm really excited about called CircleUp, and what they do is it's a crowdfunding platform that matches traditional consumer businesses, which Maveron tends not to invest in,
Sure.
with investors who want that. And so depending upon what your niche is and the kind of funding you're seeking, really easy to Google a bunch of different sources on the web, and I think reach out to people who are focused on your area.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that many people, or at least first-time founders, don't do, and that is start to identify people, like who would be potentially invest in my company. Who are those people, whether they're individuals or whether they're companies, VCs. I mean, you have to at least use the rifle approach and know that these 5 companies will at least likely invest in what I'm doing versus they have no interest in your product and or service.
Yeah, when we get 4,000 inbound inquiries and a person that's investing or interested in building a traditional B2B business, and I kind of send an email back saying, do you know what we invest in?
Yeah.
So I think know your audience is a key thing that all entrepreneurs should do as they seek funding.
Yeah. So how do you normally get introduced to I'm going to call them successful companies, meaning companies that have been successful in getting in your door? How do they actually get introduced to Maveron? What's the method?
Just a myriad of different ways. We have a bunch of people. First, we have our investors. We have networks of angels who are investing early.
Yeah.
We have entrepreneurs who we've backed before. We have the employees of the companies that we've backed who've seen us work. We seek out a bunch of people also.
Sure.
A lot of times we'll try and connect with entrepreneurs before they start something, and just kind of
the good ones, right?
hang around the hoop until they're ready to do something.
Yeah.
I mean, Blue Nile's a perfect example. We were smart enough to turn that down twice.
Very well.
And
That's
then finally, when those 2 great entrepreneurs, Mark Vaidon and Daryl Cavins, were ready to do it again, we were there.
Yeah. And that's Zulily.
And that is
for those of you who don't know, that's Zulily, started by the same people. So I'm going to play a little word association, a name association game. I'm going to say a name, and I want you to say the first 1 or 2 words, not more than that the name makes you think, okay? So I'm just going to say a name, and you're just going to say 1 or 2 words. Meg Whitman.
Awesome operator.
Coach K from Duke.
One of my mentors.
Magic Johnson.
Aspirational entrepreneur.
Tony La Russa.
One of baseball's great managers.
Andra Hall.
My right hand since we started Maveron in 1998.
And last, Stacy Levitan.
My wife and partner, and the person who's most willing to tell me when I'm making a mistake.
That's great. So the reason I asked that is because, I've been around you enough to know that people are really, really important to you. And they're important in the startup world. If you don't have great people, you're going nowhere very quickly. So tell us, why are people so important to Dan Levitan?
Well, I think that one of the things I would say to entrepreneurs or aspiring people is have a mentor or many mentors. I've been blessed with 4. And I think people who've been there, done that, who have the values that you have and who have some experience that you could benefit from are frequently far more willing to help you than you think. And I remember I was in my 30s, and someone asked me who was my mentors, and I didn't have any. And this guy looked at me like I was crazy. And he had a whole stable of mentors. And he said, how do you think I've gotten ahead? And he explained to me that many times the mentor wants to feel like he or she is helping. And they get as much out of it psychologically as the mentee. And so one of the things that we look for with great entrepreneurs is, have they attracted people around them that can help them accelerate their progress? I'm here in Seattle partly because I was privileged enough in 1991 to meet a guy named Howard Schultz.
Not so bad.
And there is a whole line of people that Howard attracted along the way as he was building Starbucks. And I would say that Howard would probably say that Starbucks is where it is today because of their team and their tenacity and their grit, but also because of the guardrails and the help that many people gave him over the years.
Yeah. And your relationship with Howard, and for those of you who don't know, they're partners in Maveron. They started it together, in 1998. So obviously they've done some great things together as a team. So, that relationship worked out, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so talking about mentors, who you mentor others, I'm assuming, correct?
I hope so.
What do you like about that?
Oh, I love that. I mean, first, I try to be the best mentor I can about my team. And so, we have a 6-person investment team, and what I try to do is help them learn the mistakes that we've made over the 17 years we've been in business.
Sure.
And what I like about that is just the interplay and watching them grow and learn and really be great at being a venture capitalist.
Sure. And
helping entrepreneurs. I think there's something incredibly rewarding by giving back to others. And then, I encourage my team that part of what we try to do is mentor, depending upon the CEO, the CEOs that we back. I mean, it's obviously going to be different if we back a really experienced person than a first-time CEO. And that's what we try to do. We try to modulate our style to fit the needs of the entrepreneur. And so a lot of entrepreneurs say, how do we work with teams? And the answer is we have no formula. We try to assess what the team needs, what the CEO needs, and we try and then figure out what individually and collectively can we bring to help them.
Yeah. And, team is very important, obviously, to build any company, whether it's a consulting company or a dry cleaner or a SaaS company, software as a service company. So what pieces have you learned that are keys to creating a great team? Like, what are 1 or 2 things, like, these things have to happen to have a great team? What are they?
I think for me, I've learned that the first thing is, do you love your team? In 2000, I had this incredible opportunity to spend an hour and a half with Coach K one-on-one. And in the middle of this discussion, out of nowhere, he kind of says, well, do you love your team, Dan? And this tough guy asking me that question was really puzzled by that. And he was totally right. So I think it starts with the leader. And do you feel like your team is aligned with you? And do you really love them? And if you love them, then helping them, working with them, having them go the distance for you, I think is really important. Then I guess I would say secondarily, it's create a set of cultural norms or values that everyone on the team understands are the hallmarks of it.
Yeah.
And when people deviate from that, talk to them and try to see if they can get back on track. And if they can't get back on track, you have to do what a good leader does and, act in the interest of the team.
Yeah, make a change. Yeah. And, talk about it, that building of a team and building of the product, because in a small company, when you're building the product and you're building your team, it's happening simultaneously, right? It's probably not happening, without each other. What do you think are keys to help creating a great product, especially a consumer product? And what team members do you really need to do that great product? What do you think is some keys there?
Well, what team members do you need? Clearly you need people who've either built or have incredible product insights. Yeah. And I think the best teams somehow have inculcated the customer's voice into all of their decision making.
You've what?
Inculcated the customer's voice.
What does that mean?
I think what that means is you have to make sure that you're on the pulse of what the consumer wants. And
how do you spell that?
Pulse?
No, inculcated. Inculcated.
We can't get off that word for you. Have you not heard that?
I've not heard that.
Okay. Inculcate. So I think on the one hand, you have to really be in touch with the customer. On the other hand, I think you have to have a brand that knows what its core purpose is and what it stands for. Yeah. What's its reason for being? And why is it different than other brands? Yeah. So there's a fine balance between being in touch with the customer and then knowing what you stand for and delivering that on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I think that really is a huge key, is that understanding your product and how that meets or matches the customer need is what I think is just doesn't happen enough for the first time entrepreneur. They don't go that far. They think, I have the problem, I'm just going to solve it for myself, but sometimes it's not a problem.
Well, one of the things we look for is entrepreneurs who are able to process data and pivot. So every company starts with a core thesis.
Sure.
And you got to launch and you got to be that. And then if you're getting results, then you got to double down on that. But if you're not, you have to have the resiliency, the self-confidence, the lack of ego to say, okay, maybe we should try this.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we always look for in entrepreneurs is, do they move ridiculously fast, and are they data driven? So if it's the first month after we make an investment and it's not working as we think,
sure,
okay, that's fine. If it's the 18th month and they're still doing the same things,
that's a problem.
They've got to let go of that initial hypothesis.
Yeah. Okay, so out of 100 companies, this is kind of theoretically, there's 100 companies that start with an idea. How many of those 100 companies are the same product 6 months later?
Well, I think if there's 100 companies that start with an idea, we've probably invested in one or two of them.
Sure.
Just
kind of saying.
How many pivot? I'd say. I think that many companies start with an idea, and then the question is, what's the next act?
Yeah.
If you really want to get big, I think you kind of have to do that. But getting back to your question, I would say, the problem is so many of the 100 are going to fail. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So how many pivot? I'd say more than half pivot, maybe 75% pivot. But probably the ones, I'd say you have a higher chance of success if you don't have to pivot completely, and you can just kind of pivot.
Yeah. You're taking a slight left instead of a hard right or hard left.
Exactly.
I guess that'd be right. So.
Our most successful companies, whether or not it's Zulily, eBay, they came up with a thesis that worked and they executed, and they definitely kind of course corrected during time.
Sure. But
kind of that initial hypothesis worked.
Yeah, the idea of the marketplace for eBay still the same.
And yet, there's a few companies, Google, which was struggling for a long time, and then kind of finally got it right when the stars and the moon align. And I think in the stuff we do, a lot of it is timing. This morning I was at a Starbucks, and the line had 12 or 15 people on it. So I pulled out my phone,
sure,
and I ordered ahead.
Yeah.
And I cut the line, and and ended up picking up my coffee in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
That's a business that 11 years ago, we lost $5 million funding. Exact same idea, but its time wasn't right.
Sure, it's too
The
early.
infrastructure of phones and the propensity of retailers and the propensity of consumers to use those kind of products just wasn't there.
Yeah. That's interesting. I work with someone that orders every day via their phone and cuts in line and thinks that's just the best thing since the wheel. It's great. It's a great opportunity for a business, right?
Since the wheel, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it is good. Since the wheel. When founders find you, they find you through a network. Obviously, your network of investors and companies, et cetera. How often does a company not find you through that network? Is it 1 out of 1,000 that actually get to you by not knowing someone in your network?
Well, I think for any venture capitalist, if you have such a flow of opportunities coming to you, the personal reference really helps you raise it. But we've had some interesting things happen over the years, how people generate attention. One person sent me an hourglass that was about this big and said, if you give me 18 minutes, I'll give you a great idea. And
set it down.
So,
it's 18 minutes long.
Exactly. So they came in, we turned the hourglass on, and they pitched the idea. It was really cool.
Yeah.
So I think trying to grab somebody in a unique way is a good idea.
Yeah. And
But I also would argue that if you're really meant to be for a particular funding source, you should be clever enough to figure out a way
to get in.
to get a warm introduction to that funding source. Yeah. And one of the things that venture guys are looking for is how resilient is the person and how connected are they to the people that they need to connect with. Because building a company is building these networks.
Yeah. So I think that's one extremely important thing that people need to understand is that the network that you're building and at least should be building on a daily, monthly basis is highly important if you're going to grow your startup and if you're going to get connected to the people that will write you checks and or, become a team member, et cetera. I mean, I don't think you can say enough about creating the network that you need. And
as you build your network, that will source the people who you can hire on a much, lower risk basis.
Yeah.
If you have a great network.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that people issue, the stability of hiring great people and having them have long runways in companies is part of what makes a company successful.
Sure.
So at Zulily, for instance, the first merchant was the merchant when they had 600 merchants. And the first marketing person was the marketing person when they had 100 marketers.
Sure.
And those companies benefit from the ability of, in this case, Lori and Dave to kind of grow into that job.
Yeah. Yeah, which is really helpful for the team around them. Absolutely. And Dan, what do you love about your job? Like, what is the thing that you wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to work to do? What is the thing that you love? Because we all do things in our job that we don't necessarily like to do. We just do it because it's part of the job. I'm not going to ask that question. I want to know, what do you really enjoy? Why do you get up and go to work in the morning and to see Andrea and the team? What's the thing that gets you up in the morning?
I'd say I love most kind of being the wingman for the entrepreneur.
Really?
I love being on the ride from obscurity and idea to ubiquity. And one of the things that I'm so thankful for is that here I am in 2015. I had the opportunity in 91 and then 92 to be kind of with Howard helping Starbucks. And I was an investment banker then, but here I've kind of replicated that obscurity to ubiquity opportunity with great people, now being very financially aligned. So, one of the companies that just announced an investment for us this week, a company called Earnest. There's it was a $75 million raise and $200 million of debt. There's a young 35-year-old CEO, and during the financing, he used to call me almost all the time 3 times a week at 10:20 p.m. on my cell phone, and the phone would ring, and my wife starts saying, "Tell Lewis I said hello." And I love being in the trenches with somebody and helping them in any way we can to help them build their business and build their team and help them strategically and help them in business development, help them think through what the next moves are. So yeah, that's what I love the most.
That would probably, coming from your position in a lot of VC firms, do you think that's unique, or you think that's pretty much a norm for the leader, which you're the leader of the pack? Is it normal for you to kind of get into the nitty-gritty stuff?
Well, I don't know if I necessarily get into the nitty-gritty, because I would also say that it's management teams that create all the value.
Yes.
So, but in this financing, for instance, as Lewis said to me at the beginning, I've never raised a round like this, so I need your help. So, am I there helping make loan decisions today? Because Earnest is a company that makes loans, personal and student loan refinance to millennials. So we try not to get into the nitty-gritty, but we try to definitely be focused in major events when we can help the CEO or the team. And is that unique? I think a good venture capitalist is on call. We're kind of a service business.
Yeah.
And I think one of the strange things that's happened in this media-obsessed world we live in is that everyone wants to give the VC a lot of credit. And in a certain sense, I'm a beneficiary of that.
Sure.
But I think at Maveron, I think we're pretty clear that we are only as good as the quality of the people that we back.
Yeah. Yeah, your money can only do so much.
And how well they can take their ideas to be big ideas is kind of a condition precedent for any VC to be successful.
Yeah. So if you could give, some brand new entrepreneur that is watching this show right now and has an idea, if you could give them like two pieces of advice, what would be the 2 most important things they should be focusing on today? Let me set the stage. They're a brand new entrepreneur. They have a product. They've got an audience, or at least a customer base they think is solving some problem. What do you tell that person?
I don't know if you can reduce it to 2 things. I mean, I guess I'd first say dream big. Really be aspirational. Not always crazy aspirational, but I think the most successful people are all crazy aspirational, right? Do you think when Jeff Bezos started Amazon, anyone thought? So I think the first would be dream big, and then I would say be incredibly self-aware and evolve, and partner with people who are better than you in different functional areas. And where I've seen the strongest entrepreneurs, it's their ability to hire people well before logic says that quality, that experienced person should join this team.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we look for in the first year or 2 of our investment, is how well did the entrepreneur scale the team in powerful positions that come in and really make an impact.
Yeah.
Because if you kind of think about what we're looking for, one individual can't do it all.
Absolutely not. No, and those guys that are trying to do it all, they're not going to be successful. Yeah.
Can't scale.
No, absolutely. Well, I just want to say thanks for being here. I've enjoyed it as usual. You're a wonderful guy to chat with, and you actually know a few things.
Well, after 17 years, you
would hope so.
hopefully learn a few things.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, thanks for being here, Dan, and good luck to Maveron. Keep it up.
Thanks, Mike, and to the entrepreneurs out there, I guess I would say, it's an incredibly wonderful thing if you're successful, and you can make it a wonderful thing if you're not. You just have to kind of know up front what you're signing up for.
Sure.
Which is a lot of peaks and a lot of valleys.
And also importantly, the partner needs to understand what they're signed up for.
Oh, totally. And I think, that's all about alignment.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, sir. Love it.